I have a special guest on today. I'm really thrilled to bring you Dr. Lorry Bellhumeur. Welcome, Lorry.
Oh, thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here with you, Stacy.
Yeah, we're going to talk about something I came to understand, many, many years ago, but it is really, really important that we all understand ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, because they affect every one of us, right? Other people have them. So we're going to get into that a little bit later, but Lorry is just an amazing person. She's a licensed psychologist. She is CEO at Western Youth Services, which is really, it's an innovative nonprofit that provides integrated mental health services to over 50,000 children and their families in Orange County, California. And so I'm really glad to have her here to help us dig into this, especially in light of the pandemic and how that affects our children's and our children experiences and boosts that ACEs score, which is not good. So Lorry, tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction. And it's just such an honor and privilege to be here. And I'm always excited and to talk about what we do here at Western Youth Services, but also to really talk about the hope that exists in really understanding adverse childhood experiences and all of those things. So at Western Youth, we provide direct and indirect, as you said, integrated mental health services. And basically what that means is we provide direct mental health services for kids that have a diagnosable mental health condition. And I don't know if you know, but 1 in 5 kids has a diagnosable mental health condition. So we provide direct services, but we also provide services, and this is where the integrated comes in, that are really upstream. Because what that means is we've been providing direct services for decades. And so we really understand some of those precipitating events or precursors that make kids more at risk to have mental health conditions. So in being able to identify those things that may precipitate depression or anxiety or PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, we started looking at the things. Well, what are those things? Let's look upstream and start providing some prevention services that are designed to decrease the risk and ultimately move the needle from 1 in 5 to, a much lower number in the future.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so it's kind of getting to that problem before the problem is there, right? When there are some of those early indications. And, that's amazing. I think we all would love that. Now, is like we talked about ACEs, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about what ACEs are, adverse childhood experiences, why they affect people. Is that one of those early indications or later?
It is. So the term adverse childhood experiences actually came from a seminal study back in the late 1990s. It was a collaboration between the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. And it was sort of like a ad hoc study. So they were looking at adults, 17,000 adults that had health issues, and they asked them questions about their childhood. And so they lumped them into these 10 categories or 10 adverse childhood experiences, 10 ACEs, that are in the categories of abuse, neglect, and family dysfunction. And they're 10 specific ones. When we're talking about ACEs, there are 10 specific ones that are in those 3 categories. And they started to make connections between the number of adverse childhood experiences and the risks, the physical health and mental health risks that are associated or correlated with these. And so interestingly, and the examples are the typical kinds of abuse that we know about: physical, emotional, sexual abuse, emotional and physical neglect. And then the family dysfunctions were really, was there a parent in the household that had a mental illness or was misused alcohol or drugs? Were they incarcerated? And back then they actually asked the question, was there a divorce in the family? And, and so those were the 10 original adverse childhood experiences that they measured. And what they found, again, this was, 17,000 adults asking, did these things happen to you when you were younger? And they looked at their health risks. And what they noticed was the health risks and mental health risks went up in stepwise fashion. The number of ACEs, as the number of ACEs increased, so did the risk for health problems like, cancer, lung disease, heart disease, but also depression, suicidal ideation, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, obesity, all those things. And so it was really profound to look at that data and see the risk go up like that for every single exposure to those adverse childhood experiences.
Right. So, and I don't want to get too, I don't want to be a statistician. But
thank you for saying that, because I love data. So if I get off and go down a rabbit hole with data, just stop me, pull me back.
But I want to make sure that people know, there's a direct correlation, a scientific a mathematical, I guess, correlation between the more ACEs, the more of these things that happen to you, and the
higher
outcome
risk.
the risk, right? And that's diabetes, obesity. That's what I was looking at originally. And but yet, cancer even. And so the direct correlation between the number of these things and health risks that we would all love to avoid is undeniable. And so that's really, really important to know.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's important to know, and this is I found this one of the most interesting things, is not any one ACE was more predictive of risk than others. You would think that there would be, but really the issue isn't the adversity, it's what the adversity did to the developing brain. And it created this toxic stress response from repeated exposure to adversity. So that's important to know too, which is also why, when we get to it a little bit later, why there's hope in having this information, knowing the information, and hope for being able to change this predictive trajectory that's associated with them.
Right. And I also wanted to have just a side note that us as adults also have this stress response to all kinds of things, including the types of things that we consider ACEs. You can still have them as adults and that still affects you. We're just talking about right now children and their health outcomes that, people might not have even imagined. And so there was another question I wanted to ask you. Does this include bystander trauma? Because there's a lot of times where the parents are fighting, or the children see or hear or experience somebody else being abused and that sort of thing. Is that one of the ACEs or part of it as well?
I think the family dysfunction areas of the original ACEs do refer to things that they were exposed to as a child. And it is, again, that the trauma that the child is experiencing is the anxiety level, those things that are happening that then affect the hormone levels and all of the things that go into what we know as a stress response. The toxic stress response is repeated, unrelenting, persistent exposure to those things without any kind of buffering. And that's the thing that makes a difference.
And so we have to rescue our children and the children around us that we see. And I'm so excited to talk about more resilience, but I wanted to talk about this in light of the pandemic, because I suspect maybe the pandemic might become one, or is it one now, one of the ACEs? Or talk to me about how the pandemic affects children.
Well, what I can say is, when we're talking about ACEs, it's really, that term is referring to that original study and those 10 things.
Okay.
So when we're talking about, and also exposure to adversity, like what we're experiencing now in the pandemic,
Yeah.
absolutely can cause that toxic stress response
Mm.
because it's repeated exposure and persistent adversity that kids and adults are really facing right now. And so it, what we're saying is that it, it's impacting when it's children, it's impacting the developing brain. So there's different,
Yeah.
and so that's why the risk associated later, in life is associated with what was happening when the brain was actually developing during childhood. But absolutely, we all know that stress can, we see the connection intuitively, stress and the physical health issues that we're having. So,
Mhm. Yeah, gut issues and all kinds of
yeah,
things.
all of those things.
And and we're going to give folks hope right now because it's not just one thing or once, a one incident thing. It is, like you mentioned, so, persistent type of tough things that happen and trauma that happens throughout somebody's life. But the more things that you have, of course, the higher the risk. Like we mentioned, it's statistically significant that the more ACEs or these type of things happen, the higher the effect. So give us some hope, because I know there are some ways that we can not alleviate, but
yes, we can
ameliorate that.
ameliorate
Okay.
and alleviate. So, so here's the good news. The good news is that the risks associated are really, the higher risks are associated without intervention. So when you see those risks going up, it's without buffering, it's without intervention. So, and so there are some categories of help that helps. And there's research behind that also. And so one of the things that I talk about is saying the number one factor in success, for children is really having at least one stable, dependable adult who believes in them.
Mm-hmm.
So really, in a category of help that helps is, and these categories of help that helps, one of the things is I'm an ACE interface trainer through the licensed material. So I want to give credit where credit is due. And so, Dr. Anda, who was one of the original researchers, and Laura Porter provide this training really around the brain science and all of that that's associated with that original ACE study. And so I've really, dug deep into the research and understanding the brain science and all of that, and also the help that helps. So I just want to give credit where credit is due.
Awesome.
So the first category is really that social connection. Is there a social support system? And so for children, if home's not a safe place, it might be a teacher. And it's just, for me, I think, I had a second grade teacher who, I was exposed to a lot of adversity. My home was not a safe place as a child, but my second grade teacher saw the potential in me and, put me to work in the classroom. And so I can really see throughout my life, in terms of building resilience, that connection that I had with mentors, always having somebody who really believed in me. So that's the number one thing is, again, it doesn't have to be in the family, but it can be, for parents, it's really important to know that social connection, just really being understood and known and connected and really believing in children. That's one.
Yeah.
And then also, having practical help, meaning for those families that are facing adversity right now, there's food insecurity, there's housing insecurity. And so having access to practical help is another, back when I was younger, we'd take our little, measuring cup over to the neighbor and say, can we get some sugar? Do you have sugar? That's kind of like practical, something that you need that's practical, but also, having, just having somebody that you can rely on to provide, day-to-day help when it's needed.
Yeah. And so those are two categories.
Those are two. Mm-hmm.
Two. Is there more or just those two? Okay. Yeah.
There's two more. And so another one is social reciprocity. So I know that, some single moms, they have like their social support system, and, one mom is watching the other kids so the other mom can be, go do her errands or whatever. But there's that
Right.
reciprocity, like we help each other. And just the social reciprocity within that social structure. And then really the fourth category is access to that help outside of the social support system. It's called social bridging, and it's the connection to real life help with either practitioners or getting help, knowing sort of when the social support system, the immediate social support system ends, and the need for either medical intervention or mental health intervention, where it's needed. So it's that bridging between what we provide within our social into, physicians and other practitioners and help that's available. So those are the four categories.
Those are the four categories. I love that you have an ACEs story. Do you mind, and if not, that's okay, telling us what your ACEs score was? Or it is, because it was your childhood. So your ACEs.
Yes. Right. So my ACE score, so I was exposed to 5 by the time I was in 2nd grade and 8 by the time I graduated from high school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this is my real life story of resilience and really being able to tell the story. And I perceive and believe that I'm a walking example of the hope that's out there. And the other thing I want to mention is that in the work that we've been doing about getting the information out about ACEs and the related life events and screening, what we found sort of anecdotally is that people that gravitate toward youth serving roles and agencies and organizations oftentimes have higher ACEs scores than the general population. So that means that those of us who've experienced high numbers of ACEs are gravitating toward helping kids have a different kind of experience. And so that just gives me even more hope, because it means that the people who are helping the next generation of kids know what it's like to be resilient, know what worked for them in building resilience, and they're kind of helping the next generation along.
Because there could be a lot of different things. I read in Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. Is it Burke-Harris or Harris-Burke?
It's Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris.
Burke-Harris. She has a book called The Deepest Well, where she kind of goes into all of this as well. And she said, even just the touch of a human touch, like putting your hand on a child's shoulder, can be one of the things that helps them, right? It's just that acknowledgement that, and so that brought tears, because that human touch right now, we're missing a lot of it. So what can people do to, like, you had a teacher that was a mentor, and she took you under her wing. And right now, a lot of kids aren't even in school, or they've missed that for 6 months, a year.
Yes.
What else will help this?
I think the thing that came to mind when you referred to Dr. Burke-Harris, and she's a real champion for this movement of ACEs, and we're just very fortunate that she's in the position that she's in. What came to mind when you referred to her talking about the physical touch is really, it's the message that is sent there is, you exist.
Yeah.
You're important to me. You're important to the world. I care about you.
Yeah.
So whatever way we can give that same message, you exist.
Yeah.
You're unique. You're amazing. And use specific examples for a child, that not just the words, but really, I really appreciated the way that you shared with your little sister. To give examples of that really demonstrate that you see them
Yeah.
that you're paying attention, that you understand them, that they're important, that, you know, and as much as possible to kind of go straight to the heart of who they are and their unique, you know, we're all born unique, but we're just as much as possible, what's that unique thing about them that you want to really honor
Right.
and protect and build up and all of those things.
Yeah.
I think that's the, I think I rambled on about,
No, but that's
about
good.
that, but you know,
But it's real, like real stuff. That's part of the things that I've been talking about is like some of the self-talk that we all have, even as
yes,
adults, right? That self-talk. And then some people say you should tell yourself, I'm going to be the greatest in the world. Well, your brain really knows you're not going to be the greatest in the world, let's say at baseball or something like
mm-hmm.
that. And so your brain doesn't believe it. And so that's not really doing anything. It's got to be believable. So when you're
Yes,
talking to kids, you really need to be sincere, right?
yes,
And help
mm-hmm.
them understand. I'm thinking, maybe little notes,
Mm-hmm.
speaking like if you're long distance by
Mm-hmm.
Zoom
Yes,
and talking to them about that and just asking,
yeah.
should you ask them or could you ask them, what was the best part of your week or what was the best thing you did this week, right? And then just really um, helping them understand how great that is.
I
And they are.
absolutely. I think the little notes and if I can be bold, I have a little note here and it's the opposite. It's actually from my daughter. And she came into my office, if this is okay to share, you know,
Yes.
my adult daughter came to visit me at the office recently. And she said, Lori Leigh Bellhumor is the most badass woman I know. I love you. And so I have this right here. So even as
Oh,
adults, the little
yes.
notes that we get that remind us, like, you know, just something about us. And I know what she means by that, you know.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
because there's context for that comment. Um, and so I think you're right. Just the little love notes that we can have on a post-it for
Yeah.
our children, or, you know, the other thing that's really simple and easy is when we're on Zoom like this, you know, if I'm looking at you, and I'm looking here, it doesn't look like I'm looking at you because
Right.
I'm looking at your image. But
Yeah.
if I look into the camera,
Yeah.
I'm making eye contact with you. And so
Yes.
if we're Zooming with children and we're looking into the camera, we're making eye contact with them and it lets
Mm.
them know I'm seen, I'm
Mm-hmm.
heard. So just
Right.
little things like that, if we're family members that are Zooming with our relatives, you know, with our nieces and nephews or, you know, whatever, that's just another trick that we can do to really make that connection.
Yeah.
So any little things like that that can, um, just make the connection. You're seen, you're heard. I know you. I know something about you.
I love that.
Specifically, those are the things that really make a big difference.
Mm. And also not only that, but you're really the kids are formulating who they think they are,
Yeah.
right, at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're doing by doing that is kind of helping to correct some of those negative things that they're starting to think because and you correct me, you're the psychologist, but I've read so much about children think naturally that the world centers on them. So when there's a
Yes.
divorce, they blame it on themselves,
Yes.
even though it has nothing to do with.
Yeah.
So when you're experiencing these adverse childhood experiences and other related things, they're attributing it to, oh, because I got a bad grade on my test or because,
Yes.
all of that sort of thing. So when you are doing these little things, you're actually counteracting those I don't know what to say, miscommunication with themselves that
Mm-hmm.
they're bad or they don't deserve anything or whatever. And if you
Mm-hmm.
can stop that then when they're
Yes.
children,
Mm.
I love it. Love
Well,
it.
what I love is you're just like hitting the nail on the head. Absolutely. Because one of the things we talk about is, you know, what are the things that we tell ourselves about ourselves? So it's like,
Yeah.
what are those things? What are those messages that we are telling ourselves about ourselves? And you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Anything that we as adults can do to turn those negative messages into something truthful and
Yes.
honest and positive, and get
Yeah.
them to say that, about themselves, then that, builds their confidence in themselves. And especially, like you said, is it's honest and true,
Right. Right.
about who they are. So that's important.
Yeah, I love it. So what are some of the things you might say, just asking off the top of my head, what that about the pandemic, or about, maybe I'm just thinking, wow, you've been so brave in wearing, like, you've been like, I'm so proud of you for wearing that mask for
Yes.
all week. I'm,
Mhm.
really amazed at you for doing that. That's amazing. That's great.
Mhm.
So tell me, what else can you say?
Well, I think some of the things that we can say are, to really, like, we're all in this together, and I think kids can even know that too. So what we can
Mm,
say is, it's normal. I'm looking for my mask here. I even put like mine on this chain, so I put it on. But it's, it's normal to not want to wear it all the time, and
right.
also it's important for us to feel safe.
Mm,
And, the mask is a way for us to feel safe right now. And so it makes us
yes.
safe, and it makes you safe, makes everybody
Right.
around you safe. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is to find ways, ask questions about, if we know that um, human connection with other, like especially with kids, what they're missing right now is community. They're not hanging out with their
Yes.
friends. And so to create those ways and means for them to do that, whether it's, Zoom meetings or whatever, just other ways for them um, to get the things that they're missing the most. But I think you were asking more about how can we affirm the things that that they are doing. Is that?
Yes, just in relation to the pandemic, like
Mhm.
how can we, not just comfort, but help to counteract the ACEs and the other things that are happening in our world right now
Mhm.
this year? What are some of those things that we can say or do?
Well, I think that, well, first of all, I think what's coming to mind is really a context that we as adults, again, I want to get back to the hope, because when we provide in those four categories, social connection and practical help and social reciprocity and social bridging, when we are thinking in terms of those categories, to build things within those things to
Mm,
really buffer the impact of the adversity. So those
right.
are things that we know are going to really buffer the impact. I think the other thing we talked about is really affirming the individual identity of children, and really honoring them for who they are. I think that's going to go a long, long way
Yeah.
to do
And
that.
and sometimes I'm thinking that's going to be hard, because kids act up, and sometimes they're not the best little people to be around, or you're frustrated because of your job,
Mhm.
and things like that. So, but it's really important. Now, the second thing that you mentioned, let me go back to that. What was the second way
Practical
of
help.
practical help? Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, would that mean something like a mindfulness practice for kids, or meditation, or something like that? Or are you talking more like, let's provide them with a counselor that can help them work
Well,
through
the
some of these?
Well, the help, the social bridging is really providing them with the counselor, but the
Okay.
practical help, yes, it would be strategies that would provide help in the moment. So it might even be help with homework, help with practice, with kids, with their breathing, you know, um,
Yes.
bubbles, using bubbles is a way for them to really help control their breath,
Oh,
especially for
good.
the younger ones. So
Right.
let's see how big the biggest bubble that you can blow, with the bubbles. And it's like,
Hmm.
and take a deep breath in. And, so there are, so I think some of the mindfulness things, I think I was just writing something a little bit earlier about creating like really um, quiet spaces in our, so it can't, sometimes for some people, it can't be a whole room, but it's ideal if it's a whole room where
Right.
this is our quiet room. And just really set the things up around to be a place where someone can go in and just, sort of quiet their mind and quiet their
Right.
movement and things like that. But, sometimes we don't have a whole room. So it can be just a place in the house with a comfortable chair. And,
Mm,
even if it's out of place, because right now, things are very disrupted, right?
yeah,
But just
right.
creating this place in a nice warm blanket, or, something where it's just some headphones or something, even if they're not attached to anything, something to decrease the
Yes.
stimuli, just like calm the body down. So yes, I think mindfulness is a type of practical help. Help with homework is practical help. Help with, cooking a meal together is kind of a practical activity that,
Right.
so those kinds of things that involve kids in activities that, make them feel better.
Yeah. We just, about 6 months ago, we as a family purchased the, oh my goodness, Headspace app
Oh,
for
yes.
a 9-year-old that's in a
Hmm.
different state, and because his school had brought it up, right?
Yes.
And
Hmm.
so we were, it was so exciting to be able to know that he knew about that app, but also we could give him a full year of, like, whenever you need to, you can,
Oh, nice.
before bed and things like that. And I don't want to get too scientific again, but I do want would you kind of explain why that, like the sympathetic nervous system and sympathetic, why things like this and breathing, like just even blowing
Mm.
bubbles and taking breath in and pushing breath out consciously helps the nervous system, and that therefore helps alleviate some of these.
Okay, so the simplest way I can explain it is that one of the things we found with the adverse childhood experiences is that when we're in that state of being exposed to toxic stress, we're in like a fight or flight.
Mhm.
Um, and when we're in that state of fight or flight, or we're, startled or whatever, and that is, so what we're doing in these mindfulness exercises is really quieting down that response.
Mm,
And so sometimes when we recognize it, if we're parents and we're recognizing it in our children, or if we're recognizing it in ourselves, the reason that we need to do it is because if you think about it, when you're when you're in that state of fight or flight, your logical brain is not engaged.
yes,
It's
true.
not engaged. So a lot of times kids are in that state and we want to say we want them to take logical action, and they're not capable of it in that moment.
Right, right.
And so we have to connect to them in an emotional level first.
Mm,
And so I see that you're really, whatever the feelings are, I see that you're really, let's help you quiet the mind and the body down, because once you quiet it down and we're no longer in that state of fight or flight, that's when you can have a logical conversation.
right.
So the benefits, and it then obviously all of those other physiological things that happen as a result of being in a calmer state,
Mm,
are obviously beneficial, I think. But for us to know as adults who are interacting with children, to calm them down allows us to then have the conversation with them that's going to guide their next steps and their behaviors and things like that.
mm. I love that. And what you're doing when you do that, I kind of relate it to, a baby sucking their thumb.
Mhm.
They're self-soothing, right?
Self-soothing, that's exactly
As
right.
you grow out of that, you don't know how to self-soothe, or maybe you don't grow out of that, or maybe you use, things that are inappropriate to self-soothe. And what you're doing is you're teaching them a really, really healthy way to self-soothe, that they can
Yes,
use that for the rest of their
that's
life. Right? Yeah.
exactly right. And adults that haven't learned how to self-soothe, what they do self-soothe. They actually binge watch TV. They play
Yeah.
video games for hours on end. They, misuse drug and alcohol. They do those
Yeah.
things that are very, self-soothing for them. And really the point is just like recognizing that that state of mind is in that, fight or flight, and to take those more healthy
Mhm.
steps like
Right.
breathing. I love my Apple Watch. I just got it. And every hour it tells me to breathe.
Yes.
To take it, not just breathe, but to take a deep
A
breath,
deep breath. Right.
and to get up and stand, or things. So we can, if
Yeah.
we don't have this kind of, we can set our alarms, or whatever, to do those things, to keep ourselves in a good state of mind, so that we
Mhm.
can build that resilience and be there for the children as well that are around us.
Yeah. All right. I want to touch on one last thing, because you
Mhm.
mentioned that mentoring has a significant impact on this. How can someone find a mentor, or how can a child, how can someone either be a mentor, or find, or if your child find a mentor, or if you're a parent, find one for your child?
I think that the thing that is really important, some mentor relations happen really naturally, and it's because there's like someone sees a quality in another person that they want to develop themselves. And
Mm,
so it's like, so that's kind of what to look for, because a mentor is really one who's like, if we think we're all kind of, going up a ladder in one way or another, a mentor might be someone who's just one rung higher or two
right.
rungs higher, right? And
Yeah.
and so it's to look for the qualities that you want to develop in yourself, or if you're a parent looking for a mentor, what are the specific things, and be as specific as possible. I really want my child to learn how to um, use his words better,
Right.
then find someone who's a really good communicator that's just going to naturally be, the example and the role model for the
Right.
child. And for me, I have many mentors at any given time, really, again, because am I wanting to, develop a certain area of the nonprofit from a business perspective, and so, or
Hmm.
is there something internally that I'm kind of working? I'm a lifelong learner. What is the thing that I'm working on in myself right now? Who has it? Who can,
Right.
who, so that's,
And so
and
you
then to
can look
be
for that
one.
for
And I would
kids.
say, as again, for those of us that are adults, seek out, we can be a mentor to our nieces and nephews. We can
Hmm.
be, we can volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club. We can,
Yeah.
volunteer if we know about business at the SBA, the Small Business Association. So put our own unique abilities to work in helping develop those in others.
Right. And that actually has its own side benefits. When you're
Right.
helping other people, that gives you, good positive um, vibes from yourself, and it has
Absolutely.
its own physical and emotional and mental benefits as well.
Absolutely.
So, wow, we could talk about this forever. This is
I know, right?
amazing. Good. I'm also a lifelong learner. So,
Mm.
Lori, thank you so much for sharing your information.
Mm.
Tell us, where can people find out more about you?
Well, I think the best way to find out about, I would say westernyouthservices.org is our nonprofit. And on there, we actually have something called a reset toolbox.
Ooh,
It's resilience, essential social emotional trainings. And they're at no cost. There's resources and stuff that we've vetted and put in there.
nice.
And so that's westernyouthservices.org. And then the reset toolbox, we have resettoolbox.com and or resettoolbox.org, maybe both of them. So that,
I'll find it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how to get those resources. And you can connect with me through the Western Youth Services website
Oh,
directly under our leadership. That's where
oh,
I found.
amazing. You know what? I forgot to ask you one thing.
Mm.
ACEs, you said, was the original study, but now there are additional things.
Oh,
Can you
right.
define that again? Just because
Well,
we talked about other
yes.
things. I just want to
So,
make sure.
in the state of California, we're using something called the Pearls to assess for ACEs, pediatric ACEs, and related life events. So there's 10 original ACEs, and then there's screening tools for other related life events like,
Right.
discrimination and
Mm,
institutional racism and food
right.
insecurity and housing insecurity. So we're really looking at the connection between ACEs and those related life events, and looking at the impact that they're having on the health and mental health outcomes for children
Yeah.
and adults.
I would just encourage everybody to go look at that toolbox. That's amazing. One thing you do could affect a child's life.
Absolutely.
That's
It
that's
only
the
takes
short of it.
one thing. I love that you said that, and I really want to make that point, because when you said just putting your hand on a kid's shoulder, one moment, one interaction can absolutely make a
Turn it
difference
around.
in the life of a child. So,
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lori, for
oh,
coming.
thank you. It was my honor and privilege to be here with you, Stacy. Thanks so much.